Chapter 291. Proactive Defense. Dominic broke through the lines as the hobgoblins ran away from him and the arcane blast spells. "Your Majesty, if I may?" he asked, extended canines making his voice raspy. Alexis nodded, and Dominic changed the orders a little. "Mages, use Firebolt into the second ranks. Don't let them back up the others. When you are fighting humans, enemies with spears will also be in the second rank, with shields in front. They also die first." The girls from the Purity sect hesitated for a split second, then began to cast. Surely, this counted as self-defense? The hobgoblins would definitely kill them if they lost. Blasts of fire erupted from the mages, instantly dropping the second row of hobgoblins and putting the first row off balance as they were hit by the collapsing bodies. That was a situation that the veiled maids had trained for rigorously just yesterday, and blades flashed as they eliminated the falling hobgoblins. It was brilliant and their first clean kills. Morale was high among the veiled maids as the hobgoblins fell, and they pushed forward to prevent the survivors from encircling them as the mages continued their assault. The distinction between the two groups was clear. Not just because of the magic, but because a lifetime of physical labor had toned the sisters into a much better body than the soft living of a mage tower had done for the others. So, they were faster, better for the front lines of the defense, while the others were stronger when they had room to counterattack, time to cast spells, and choose the enemy's weakest points. Eventually, those differences would fade. But a maid who is too clearly trained, too toned, instead of soft and delicate, would give away their secret role and put potential enemies on guard, and the veiled maids at a disadvantage. They might hide their faces, but there was no mistaking the difference between the grace of a dancer and the raw physicality of a female warrior like Ella. The veiled maids had to tread that line, and always come across as unassuming.
Until it was time to strike.
The last of the monsters fell, and Dominic watched the prisoners in the camp struggling to remove their restraints and climb to their feet, intending to flee while they had the chance. Seeing Dominic attack their captors didn't exactly inspire confidence that he was the reasonable sort of man who might listen to their pleas. Given the option between facing him and making a run for wherever the trolls had gone, they were seriously considering following the troll. "Wilkes," Dominic called. "On it, boss." The Royal Guard colonel sauntered out of the woods with his rifle slung over his shoulder and his armor gleaming, then waved to the panicked prisoners. "Ladies and gentlemen, salvation is here. The Signia Royal Guard has come to free you from your imprisonment," he declared in his most pompous and official tone. The haggard captives paused, then rubbed their eyes to make sure that they had seen things right. A moment ago, a dragonkin sorcerer had ambushed their captors and freed the troll from his compulsion, and now there was a royal paladin here to rescue them? What sort of fairy tale situation was this? Could it be an illusion to see if they were foolish enough to try to turn in their captors? It wouldn't be the first mind game that had been played on them since they were taken. But the stench of terror and blood was undeniable, as was the body of the Grand Elder. Wilkes stopped 10 paces from them and put his rifle into storage, trying to look less threatening. "Can you tell me where you were taken from, and who your captors were?" Duke Wistover neglected to leave one of them alive for interrogation. He asked softly. One of the young men among the prisoners snorted in amusement. "Neglected to leave one alive, indeed. Lord Paladin, we were taken nearly 2 months ago, near Kynwyn. The mages are Dago's Army Magic Corps regulars. Well, one was the Grand Elder, and the other was his bonded acolyte. They led us here, gathering monsters, and then for the last month, we have simply been waiting. Say, I don't suppose you have any food? It's been a few days since they saw fit to feed us." He asked. "Of course. I will have someone bring food for you all. But did you say that they are part of the Dago's army regulars? Who is their commander? Did they mention anything about leadership?" Wilkes asked. The prisoner shrugged. "The Grand Elders seem to be in charge of everything, but they answer to someone that they call the Master, and to the Prince, though I don't know what prince." Wilkes nodded. "Right, you've been prisoners for 2 months, you don't know." Signia counterattacked. "Every prince except for Prince Kaizon is dead or imprisoned. Stantia province was ceded to Signia after the war ended, and that is where you are now, not far from the Duchy of Wistover." The man made a protective gesture. Lord Paladin, we need to leave. Westover is cursed. Anyone who comes within 100 kilometers dies a most horrific death. Wilkes laughed. Now, that might have been true until very recently. But we live in Westover, at the old Earl's Manor. The man with the golden horns is Duke Dominic Wavemates, the Duke of Westover, returned to his ancestral home. Over there is Princess Alexis of Signia, now the Duchess Westover. While it is still incredibly dangerous for Dago soldiers and roaming monsters to approach Westover, there is little threat to you. The entire group of prisoners gave Wilkes matching skeptical looks, then flashed a glance at Dominic. That was easy for him to say, but they had been right behind the mages when Dominic had attacked. Wilkes picked up Dominic's hat and brushed it off. How about we bring you to speak with the princess? She's marginally less intimidating than the Duke. Not any less dangerous, Wilkes knew, but certainly less intimidating than Dominic when he was angry. The whole feral dragonkin thing tended to terrify people. Chapter 292. Prisoner's Experience. Alexis smirked at Dominic, who just shrugged in return. But his eyes were glowing gold, his teeth were sharp, and his claws were out. Every time that he got excited lately, more draconic aspects would appear, making Alexis suspect that his bloodline was only now beginning to awaken. Either because he was back in Westover, or because he was finally taking on the roles that his bloodline wanted him to. There was a saying in Signia, "You can run from fate, but not forever." That was what Alexis suspected was going on with Dominic. Either that, or it could be something as simple as his possessive nature reacting to any sort of threat to his status as her chosen partner. He had charged out as soon as she was in danger, and most of the other times she had seen his bloodline react was when she was teasing or tempting him. One of the Purity Sect mages walked up to Dominic and stood on her toes to stare deeply into his eyes, while he gave her a confused tilt of his head, wondering what she was up to. Interesting. That's not a spell, it's really your eyes. She noted. Of course, they're my eyes. They've been in my head my whole life. Dominic agreed. No, they're glowing gold. I thought that it might be a side effect of a spell that you were using, possibly the Arcane Blast. Many mages' eyes glow when they have defensive magic active, or have a staged spell ready to cast, she explained, still uncomfortably close to his face. Well, that is interesting news. I've never noticed them doing that before. Dominic replied, then carefully moved the mage back a step. Alexis shrugged. She had seen it more than once. But as it didn't impair his vision, Dominic wouldn't notice unless he was looking in a mirror when it happened. What will we do about the troll? Wilkes asked carefully. Going by what the dead mages were saying, there is a whole group of them. I will go talk to them. My family has a pretty good relationship with trolls in general, and I'm sure that they'll agree not to cause trouble. Dominic offered. Everyone else stared at him like he had said something insane, while Dominic waited for them to respond. You plan to negotiate with them? Alexis asked.
Sure.
We haven't had any trouble with the water troll in the river, have we? 1 slow blink. 2 slow blinks. There is a river troll nearby? And you didn't think to tell anyone? Dominic shrugged. I asked him not to attack any of my people, and then fed him some goblins. That's really all it takes, as long as nobody goes picking fights with him. We need to work on defining what constitutes an important fact that everyone in town should know. Alexis noted. What about these new arrivals, though? They've gotten very close to inhabited territories, and they've just been removed from the influence of a mage sect. We didn't get the details, but these former prisoners might know more if we ask the right questions. Why don't you take them back to town, and I will go catch up to the sheriff and Billy Bob before they get themselves injured. Dominic offered. The princess sighed, then nodded. You do that. If the trolls will listen to you, it has to be you. They certainly aren't going to listen to anyone else. Dominic took off at a run, and Alexis turned to the people that the mages had been keeping captive. Would you like to come to Westover after you eat? At the very least, we can get you a few nights' rest, some proper food, and some fresh clothes. Then you can decide if you're staying or going home. We get caravans from the Merchants Guild every week or so, and you can get a ride with one if you wish to leave. She offered. The unofficial spokesperson for the prisoners frowned. Given everything that we know about Westover, the best answer would be no, thank you. However, I trust you when you say that it is safe to enter and no longer cursed. We appreciate your hospitality, Princess. If you lead the way, we will follow." Alexis turned away so she could signal her royal guards. Check them all for contagious disease and anyone who might still be a spy for Dagos. There was a chance that there was another mage pretending to be one of the prisoners and that they would attack once they were unattended around civilians. Dominic quickly caught up to the pair trailing the troll, as they weren't rushing. The last thing that they wanted was to actually catch up to the troll out in the open and have it find them first. "Gentlemen, I will go ahead and speak with the trolls. They're likely to listen to me, and that should solve our problem," Dominic whispered. "Seriously?
All right.
We will follow at a safe distance." Sheriff Nate agreed. Dominic followed the trail of the troll off into the distance and found that the rest of the trolls had gathered along the river, 10 kilometers west of Baron William's holdings. They had only recently arrived, Dominic could tell. The grass was still springing back up on the path they had followed. But it wasn't just trolls. There were also 2 mages with them who were standing around some sort of magical array. It wasn't a physical device, but a spell they were casting. Dominic waited for a few seconds, trying to determine what it was for. Then, he saw the array pulse with mana that wrapped around the necks of the trolls. It was the array to keep them under control, so they didn't smash the mages. Dominic smiled as he lifted his rifle to his shoulder. A sharp crack and one mage fell, splattering blood all over the face of the other. The second mage panicked and ran into the group of trolls. For a second, Dominic thought that he might have had a plan. But the mage kept running, right out of the camp. A second round dropped him, and Dominic raised an area barrier as he stood and walked toward the trolls. Now for the fun part. Chapter 293, Hello Trolls. Dominic waved with his free hand as he lowered his rifle, and the trolls all waved back. Then, the water rippled, and one more troll waved at him. "Good morning, gentlemen. Oh, and ladies, I nearly missed you in the back row. My name is Dominic Wavemates, the new Duke of Westover, which covers this whole region. I believe that your watery friend can vouch for my identity." Dominic greeted them. One of the older trolls stepped forward, dragging his club. "You don't like the mages?" the creature asked in a gravelly voice. Dominic shook his head.
No.
"They're working for outsiders who want to cause trouble. We're from here. This is our place. They have no right to be taking trolls as prisoners to fight their wars." The troll frowned, needing time to decipher all of Dominic's words. "You're the big boss of the humans?" The troll tried. "Only the humans within 1 day of here," Dominic explained. The trolls nodded happily. That was a concept that they understood. Dominic was the local clan chief. "I am chief too. You want us to leave?" the troll asked. "You can stay, but no attacking my humans or the visiting humans in wagons," Dominic offered. The troll considered his options. "There is an old troll place that way. We will go there and make it our place." "Near your place, but 1 day away from here." Dominic nodded. He remembered where the old troll village was. "That is a good place. If there are still trolls there, tell them I say hello." The water troll rapidly chattered to the other trolls, most likely translating the conversation for them. Nobody looked upset, and when they got to the part about an old troll village that they would call home, the mood of the recently freed trolls visibly improved. "All right, we will go now." "Wait, before you go. You can have the mages, but leave me their stuff," Dominic requested. The big troll smiled. "Too small for a troll anyhow." The group quickly stripped the dead mages of their armor and belongings, then pulled the limbs off to share the meat. Dominic didn't miss the horrified and disgusted looks that Baron William was giving them all as they walked away, chewing on raw meat. But the trolls were in a good mood, and they didn't make any attempt to attack him or the sheriff. Dominic tossed the last arm that had been left behind to the water troll, so it didn't have to come out to get lunch, and then went to collect the belongings that were left behind. What he found was damning. There were 2 coin pouches, identical to the one that had been recovered from the first dead mage, the one who had self-destructed when John had attacked in the dark. They must be from the same group, and that meant the dead leader should be one of the Mage Tower's elders. But that also meant that it wasn't just a handful of rebels working with what was most likely Prince Kaizan's faction. It was more likely to be the entire tower or school. Dominic recalled that the pouch was supposed to have come from an academy in Skipple, but he couldn't recall if anyone had said whether it was a student or a member item. He would have to ask for the elders' belongings to compare. Did you just let the whole group of trolls wander away? They're headed north, away from the village. But what if they come back? Baron William asked. Relax, my friend. They're headed for a troll village about a day away. They'll be far enough off that even our hunting patrols are unlikely to stumble across them by accident, and they've got no interest in trying to raid the baronies for snacks. Dominic informed him. So, we just have trolls as neighbors then? The Baron asked. Exactly. They make good neighbors. Most of the time, anyhow. Trolls don't understand the concept of intentionally lying, and they rarely go back on their word. These ones agreed not to cause trouble for my people or the merchant caravans, and that should be enough. Plus, having them on the north side of town is a nice security measure. Dago's forces aren't going to know to play nice with the trolls, so they will attack, and the trolls will take care of them for us. The sheriff's expression changed through a whole range of emotions, then settled on slightly amused. All right then, I will trust that you know what you're doing. At the very least, you do know where they're planning to settle, right? He asked. Of course. I've been there more than once. Some of the smaller species of trolls look more like Larry, the healer. They're not all the size of ogres. With a mask on and their hood up, some of them were human enough that they felt comfortable coming to the village to trade. Terrible at speaking the human languages, and that gave them away. But we all played along like they were just foreigners, so they didn't get uncomfortable. That village didn't have any half-trolls in it, but I'm told that most of them did. Dominic's explanation set the Baron and Sheriff's minds at ease, and they looked back toward the other battlefield. Should we go make sure that they didn't leave anything behind? Or do you think that they'll still be there when we get back? Sheriff Nate asked. If we walk, they'll be gone, but we will likely catch up to them anyhow. They weren't in great shape. That was the understatement of the day. Most of the prisoners looked like they were one wheezing breath away from ending up in an ogre stew pot. The fact that any of them were still alive after so long was more due to the mages having some use for them than their physical condition. What they were being kept for, Dominic didn't know. But Alexis and her royal guard would surely find out. Chapter 294. It's always her. Sheriff Nate led the way back to the site of the battle, and sure enough, the others were already on their way. Not far, Dominic could still hear them in the distance. But he couldn't see them through the trees. The scene had been cleaned, with only a few signs of blood left, and the remains of the campfire. Dominic kicked at the ashes, making sure that nobody had dumped incriminating evidence in the fire, but it came up clean. No sign that someone had tried to melt down or hide a metal emblem or token. There was a reason that most organizations made their emblems of metal or stone, and it wasn't just for durability. They were hard to dispose of, so traitors couldn't get away easily. No sign of freshly dug holes. No one accounted for trails leaving the area. Only 2 coming in and 1 going out. Sheriff Nate noted. Well, that's all we needed to know. Let's return to the others and call the day a success. Dominic agreed. A success? Baron William asked. We were out hunting monsters. What were you 2 out for? Dominic asked. Not monsters. But I suppose that's as good as anything. The Baron replied with a shrug. Only a few minutes through the woods, Dominic caught sight of the back of the procession, which was being guarded by Colonel Wilkes and 1 other guard. He whistled softly so that they knew he was coming, but stayed back of the group so that he didn't scare the new arrivals any more than necessary. They had already been traumatized enough, and if they were going to stick around Westover, it was better that they got a chance to relax a little before they first entered the town, so they didn't make a rough first impression. Alexis led the group to town first, in hopes of finding them something to wear. There wasn't much at the manor. They weren't stocked to be taking in people with nothing. But the tailors had some items, and the residents were happy to help with some of their old clothes. That was all that it took for the rescued group to start feeling human again. Well, that and a hot shower. While they got clean, the maids returned to the manor and began cleaning the old barracks so that it could be used as temporary shelter for larger groups. The old military net hammocks were still hung from eyelets in rows 3 high, suitable for sleeping 100 soldiers in a single stone building. The roof leaked, and the interior was a mess, as animals had gotten into it, and there were owls living in the rafters. But that was nothing that a dedicated team of mages on a cleaning frenzy couldn't deal with, and they even had spells to mend the old fishing net hammocks so they could be used again. After inspection, they even found blankets sealed away in an airtight cabinet. They were musty, but not moldy. So, the ladies gave them a quick wash and hung them to dry. Now that they had somewhere for the new arrivals to sleep, and any other guests that needed housing, the veiled maids were in a much better mood. Cleaning up in the barracks was much easier than polishing and cleaning a guest room in the manor after every visitor. Do you think that we should ask Beth to get us ingredients for soup? There is a Magitech fireplace here, and the soup pot is now clean. One of the mages asked. The others shrugged. They didn't know what Alexis was going to do with them. So, they just returned to the manor and started to catch up on their other work. Dominic returned to the manor while the others were still in town and went to find Beth. Guess what we found? He began. A group of oppressed refugees being conveniently chased by the monsters that you wanted to hunt, that I now need to feed?
She asked.
Oh, you're getting good at this. I can't guarantee that you'll have to feed them, but I wouldn't bet against it. Dominic agreed. I've already started on it. I was in the garden with Millie and Tenna when they came by. Speaking of which, can you go check on Jasmine? I don't hear the tractor baling hay anymore, but she isn't back. She might be trapped in the barn by the goats again. The cook requested with a motherly smirk. Got it. I'll go find the farrier and play with the goats, so they don't get bored. Dominic waved to the Blink cat as he approached the barn, and the cat grinned at him, then leapt down to accompany him into the barn, where an annoyed female voice was arguing with the goats. I swear to the gods, I'm not trying to steal your baby. Why must you attack me every time I come in here to do repairs? Jasmine demanded. Dominic clapped his hands, and the goats turned to charge at him, led by a wobbly and happy newborn. Oh, you are precious. Dominic greeted the little one, who headbutted his legs. He patted it on the side, then caught the mother who had reared up to headbutt him, in the traditional greeting of goats everywhere. Good work, Mama. Your little one is adorable. He added. The ewe accepted a pat on the head, then stepped back to let Dominic inspect the newborn. How do you do it? I tried the same thing that you do, but they just gang up on me. Jasmine complained. She was coming to the door of the barn with a damaged feed dispenser bar in her hands and bruises on her arms from the local horn menace. I have no idea why they pick on you. It's just you, by the way. They don't do it to Tenna or Millie. Dominic replied. The farrier sighed. This is the only damaged one, and the machine will work without it for now. I'm just going to take it to Pop's place to fix it. He will have the tools to sort it out. I've got the farrier's forge and the horse stables fixed up, but the room is too small for this. It's just meant for heating horseshoes. All right, you make your escape. I will keep the goats from chasing you. Chapter 295. Millie is recovering. The Blink cat hopped up on the stable stall beside Dominic, close enough that he could include the 20-kilo animal in the love fest, while Jasmine made her great escape. Millie, the garden witch, came in with her usual dreamy smile and waved at Dominic. Oh, Kitty likes you too. I came to make sure that the new goat was doing well, she announced. The cat clearly rolled its eyes at her. The little goat was feeding now, and the older goats had come to greet Dominic. How has your head been? Dominic asked as the elf crouched to hug one of the animals. Much better. The princess and her men have cast spells to heal me that are better than my own, and the headaches are nearly gone. My mind is a little more clear, too. Oh, that is excellent news. It's much easier to spend time in the garden when your head doesn't hurt. Dominic replied. She smiled and nodded in agreement. I've got a new chair made at the corner of the garden, so I can just sit in the shade under the big tree. Planting the second garden was a good idea. It's got a much better view of the sunset. Dominic chuckled. How is that second garden coming along? Excellent. It's smaller than the other garden, so it's got all the things we don't need much of. The radishes, pumpkins, and raspberries mostly. I snuck some dragonberry bushes in there as well, but Tenna says I'm not supposed to tell you. Dominic smiled at the proud and utterly innocent-minded elf. Good work. The other witches have been making medicine with them. For fever? They're good for that, and they help you sleep as the illness fades. One berry, sliced and steeped in a pot of tea, will treat a whole house full. Dominic didn't know that. But then they also ate the berries and pie, and he was never really sick as a child. While they talked, the kitchen staff was hard at work, getting a larger-than-usual pot of soup ready and baking a fresh batch of flatbread. If the prisoners hadn't been fed much, then giving them a heavy meal could make them very sick. But soup and bread would be easy on the stomach, as well as filling enough that they could sleep well. Every family in town had a similar story, and while they didn't know the specifics yet, as the veiled maids hadn't seen the need to share the sordid details, it didn't take a genius to know that Alexis was going to gain more faithful followers after today. Probably not as house staff, they already had more than enough of those. But perhaps workers for the new factory if they had the magic, or even moved out to one of the farms. As dinner approached, the maids started to set up folding tables and benches in the main hall, as there were too many guests expected to fit at the one table tonight. First, there were the rescues, but they were also expecting to see the sheriff and members of both barons' estates. They had concerns about the attacks and the risk to their people, as they were further from the estate and didn't have a standing guard, or really any other need for one. The first to arrive was Baron Keith, who came with his wife and one of his older sons. The road to their barony was clearly visible from the yard, where Dominic was chatting with Millie, so he went to greet their guests at the gate. Only, Alexis got to them first, as she was on her way back with the new arrivals. They were clean and properly dressed now, though everything looked like it was secondhand. But they weren't looking quite as traumatized as they had been a few hours ago, and Dominic took that as a good sign that they might recover from their ordeal. He could sense that most of them had strong magical affinity, and that was most likely the reason that they were taken. The mages who were holding them would have needed more bodies for ritual spells, and prisoners would serve as a perfectly good conduit. Trolls would as well, but an unwilling troll was much harder to control than a terrified human villager who had never been in a fight in their lives. "Welcome back, Baron. Welcome to Westover Manor, everyone." Dominic greeted them as they reached the gate. "Duke Westover, it's good to see you again. Baron William informed me of the situation." Baron William explained. "Of course, come in and make yourself comfortable. This must be your wife and son. It's a pleasure to meet you both. Sheriff Nate should be here soon, along with a few others." Surprisingly, Dominic saw many more people coming to the manor tonight. Sheriff Nate was expected, but General Alater, Captain Brass, and Omar Khalil were also on their way over. They must be representing the town guard, as they were all ranking officers before they arrived here. But Betty, the most human of the witches, was coming to see them as well. She was sipping tea as she stumbled down the path to her house, still trying to wake up for the night. The last to arrive would be Billy Bob, and the Baron was already visible with one other man. Most likely his castellan or advisor, as the Baron had mostly come with a makeshift group of settlers and no family. The architects and male mages were on their way back as well, as their day was finished. It would be crowded in the dining room. As the rescued group passed, Dominic noticed that more than one had the same tattoo on their shoulder.
He would have to ask about that.
If it wasn't a mark of membership in a group, it might be a curse or magical array. If it wasn't currently active, but that didn't mean it wouldn't trigger in the future. Maybe he should have gone with them to get answers. Chapter 296, Playing Host. For the first time in a while, Dominic actually had to play the part of the noble host, as he had both barons in his home for a somewhat formal visit. Fortunately, he had Alexis, and she was the consummate professional hostess, making everyone feel comfortable and moving smoothly through the crowd. All that Dominic needed to do was to chat with the few people brave enough to come up and talk to him while waiting for the dinner to begin. Mostly that meant that two barons and the witches. "So, this is the infamous Millie, is it? Your work on the manor gardens is a local legend. They say that you turn out the best vegetables anywhere." Billy Bob informed her, testing how she responded. Millie's head bobbled happily. "I love gardens. You should see the squash that we harvested this morning. It's the perfect yellow." The Baron smiled indulgently as he realized that her mind hadn't completely recovered from whatever injury she had sustained in the past. He also didn't miss the protective look that the old gardener was sending their way. But the answer only got Betty more excited. Oh, you have yellow squash? We have pumpkins and green skin squash, but no yellows or butternuts. Millie handed the other witch a handful of loose seeds, and Betty winked at her before passing over a small fern plant from her storage, which Millie sniffed, then decided to continue holding. Then Betty smiled at Dominic. I see we found some more people. That's why I came over. The coven leader says that they smell like witch magic. It doesn't look like they're a coven, though. Dominic nodded. They were taken from somewhere up near Kynwyn, but they're not a coven. At least, I don't think that they were. If they were, then the pair of mages who were holding them prisoner wouldn't have been able to keep them contained. If they have some magic, we can get them good jobs in town, though. They were native residents of Wavemates, so they were most likely part witch or other magic user. Most of the country was. Betty, are witches compatible with techno-magic? I don't remember the old coven of garden witches using anything more complex than lights and a Magitech stove. We're going to open a factory in town making Magitech lights, and that will require them to be compatible with making Magitech circuits. He asked. Both barons waited eagerly for her answer. It wasn't a project directly in their barony, but the more that the duchy made, the less that it would ask of them in the future. That was just how it went when the king came asking for taxes. They would pass it to the dukes, who would pay some, then pass the rest down the line, until the barons had to put the last of the load on the commoners under them. That way, nobody had to claim responsibility for the suffering of the people. After all, they paid their share, right? Betty nodded. Some of us aren't good with it because of our magic. But only the more powerful witches have issues with other sorts of magic. Those ones, they don't look like they've been trained in anything at all, so they're more likely to be a blank slate that you can teach to be apprentice techno-wizards without any trouble. That will be perfect. The new housing looks like it is getting close to finished as well. Betty and Millie both nodded at Dominic's comment. Baron Keith chuckled. The woodcutters and the carpenter have been working hard to get floors in the first building today. They'll be installing the final bits and the Magitech in the first building tomorrow, I think. The old men looked pretty pleased with themselves when I stopped in on the way. Well, they are ahead of schedule. It will be good to see new buildings in town again. Everything else that we have been moving people into has been renovated housing from before the Dago's invasion.
We're almost out of that, though.
How are things going at the baronies? Are you getting settled in? Dominic replied. Baron Williams smiled. Yeah, we settled in pretty well. I've got one apprentice techno-wizard in the barony, and he's been doing the maintenance on aging systems for us. Other than that, everything has gone smoothly. Baron Keith, who had arrived with over 30 of his extended family members, sighed and shrugged. As far as the actual work and housing situation, all is well. The crops are coming up well, and the pantry is full. However, bringing my mother-in-law might have been a mistake. Leaving that bitter old woman behind in Eastern Signia would have been a kindness to the rest of the family. She was the matriarch of her branch before the men were all lost in the war, and now that her daughter is the Baron's wife, she's gotten the impression that gives her the right to lord it over the rest of the family. It's been no end of headaches. Dominic patted him on the shoulder. That is unfortunate. You can't even get too strict with her without upsetting your wife. But she will adapt in time. Baron Keith's wife came over as they were talking and approached as he was complaining about her mother. She's not that bad. Don't go giving the Duke the idea that we can't handle our affairs. She snapped. She went after both my elderly uncle and a toddler with a whip for disrespecting her authority as matriarch this week. She's out of control, and I was hoping the Duke had a way to settle things without public punishment. Baron Keith retorted. Betty's eyes literally glowed with excitement. Family drama right in front of her? That wasn't something that they got in the coven. Dominic smiled at the Baroness, hoping to calm the tension. Sometimes our feelings for our parents give them too much leeway for propriety. Nobody wants hard feelings between family members, but that doesn't mean letting them run wild. As with anything else, given the freedom to do as they please, not everyone will pick a path that is best for anyone but themselves. With such a new barony, it would be a shame if I had to sign the edict when the Baron stripped someone in his family of their authority. That changed the Baroness' entire mood. Noble rules weren't family law. The Baron could have his mother-in-law exiled to a remote farmhouse and punish anyone who tried help her move if he wanted. In fact, that was a fairly common retirement plan for annoying in-laws. Chapter 297. Share the plan. Dinner was served, and Dominic made sure that the two witches got seated together so that they didn't end up isolated or shouting at each other across the table. When they weren't part of another conversation, they were happy to spend all night talking about plants. Other than Tenna and possibly the barons who were responsible for farmland, that conversation would quickly bore anyone else. Dominic turned to Suni, their lead architect. So, how is the first building coming along? I heard that you've been making great progress. Suni puffed up with pride. Indeed, the woodcutters brought us plenty of lumber, and the mages made short work of cutting them to length and drying them. They've got a Magitech sawmill outside of town, and they're quick about splitting boards for us. We've got the whole floor done, there are just some small details left, and then we need to put the roofing on. We gave the roof a plank roof, covered in tar, but we're putting clay tiles over it for durability. That's how most of the other houses in town are built, and it's very durable. Baron Keith smiled at the excited architect. So, there will soon be an architect available for hire in town? My family is pressuring me to put an expansion on the barony manor. I will admit that some of it is my fault. I've got a very large family, and with all my unmarried children, plus my parents and my in-laws in the house, we will need more space soon. You have it hard. Your mother-in-law has already been by, demanding to know when we will be finished the housing complex so that we can start working on the projects that she has planned. Suni replied sadly. Dominic winked at him. At least you can still talk back. My father-in-law is rather terrifying. The dessert course came out, an apple strudel served with cinnamon-spiced pudding, as they didn't have enough animals to make whipped cream or ice cream for so many yet. Once that was finished, they got down to business, and Alexis came to stand beside Dominic so that they could explain the situation without having everyone look back and forth. Alexis began the explanation. First off, I will lay out the basics. We have twice now encountered attacks by members of the Skipple Mage Academy. This time, one of the attackers was an elder. Going by the information we found in their belongings and the presence of only Dago's coins, we have reason to believe that they are a faction that has defected from their mage tower. Both attacks have had monsters with them, and we now have proof not only that the monster attacks were organized by Dagos, but specifically by Prince Kaizan. The elder had written orders with the prince's insignia on it, and the witnesses that we have been able to speak with informed me that they had only the same few visitors in the past 2 months. So, the effort to invade with monsters is not yet over. They are simply in hiding. For that reason, we will be calling for regular army reinforcements. The king has been informed, and we are waiting on his response, but in the meantime, we will be increasing the training and equipment levels of the town guard. They have already been given magical swords and pistols, but we will also be providing magitech suitable for dealing with larger groups of monsters. The groups that we have encountered were smaller ones so far, with the most dangerous being the group controlled by the Elder, which was a fist of war trolls. Dominic has taken care of them, and given their free will, they have chosen to move to a village about a day's walk from here. The trolls are not a threat to the village, and now that they are prepared, they are unlikely to be coerced again, even if they are found by another elder of the Dagos mages. Until the army arrives, we will only be running short-range patrols around town. That will give us sufficient time to respond if a threat is found, while still being far enough out that we can protect all the farms and outlying workers. But threats are not the only news that we have. The first of the buildings of the new apartment complexes is about to be ready, with 5 more to follow. Once those are being finished, we will be constructing a warehouse for the town's new Magitech factory. Notices looking for workers with aptitude for mana will be going up in the next few weeks, and training in basic magical engineering will be provided. I know that most of you have at least heard the rumors, so I want to clarify them. Our first products will be Magitech lights and fireplace inserts, so a regular wood stove or fireplace can be run on magic. Both are designed to be affordable to the masses, and we hope that this project will completely fund the duchy's future efforts. Alexis paused, and Baron Williams smiled at her. So, you're thinking that the duchy might make enough that even after the 2-year exemption, you might not have to raise taxes to fund the estate? He asked in a hopeful tone. That is exactly the intent. Currently, the duchy is more of a county in size, but we should be able to make it one of the wealthiest in the region. Dominic answered. Alexis smiled at the new Baron. Look at you. Gone from Billy Bob of the regiment to a properly business-minded Baron in under a month. The young Baron chuckled. Well, I can't say that I hate it. Just wait until I have the winery properly stocked again. You won't be the only wealthy noble in the region. Alexis smiled, but Dominic could see the scheming in her expression. If she had her way, and they found the rest of the hidden monster herders, Princess Alexis would be fabulously wealthy just based on monster cores. Getting to hunt monsters while still fulfilling her duties as a duchess was one of the best parts about this location. Chapter 298. Need to level. The princess' speech was enough to settle everyone's questions, and the nobles moved to the sitting room with the generals, while the rest of the group began to disperse. The maids were already preparing rooms for the noble guests, as nobody would expect them to head home in the dark. But the primary purpose of chatting late into the evening was not to give time to clean, but to strategize. Will you have any extra weapons? I've got my gear, as the Natural Sons Regiment lets us leave with it. But I don't have anything to equip my people with. Even a few armed farmers can make a big difference against a goblin attack until the guard shows up. Baron William asked. Dominic smiled. Well, I've got some extra uncommon grade spears left, and I will make more to send over. 1 or 2 in every farmhouse should be a good start. Baron Keith frowned. Are you sure that it's wise to arm the commons? Common logic dictates that they should have as few weapons as possible so that they don't get ideas of insurrection. Not that I think any of us are likely to mistreat our people to that point. But it still holds as a general policy, with only the vetted members of the adventurers' guilds carrying weapons in public. Dominic shrugged. Even 100 at a time, farmers with spears and pitchforks couldn't stage an insurrection against someone with as much power as myself or the princess. And we will live for a long time. But you give me a good idea. We should alert the Adventurers Guild. We could put out some bounties for the monsters between us and the Midfield border. It's a huge open area, easy for them to hide, but we can claim that it's for the safety of the farmers and travelers. It makes us look like the good guys, and it brings in groups of trained people to assist until we can get the army to arrive. Alexis frowned, then nodded. That's not a terrible idea. Even if they clear a few days around us, it will help everyone relax. We might also get a few to settle here when they realize that Westover isn't a bad place to be. Adventurers tend to be migratory by nature, living out of hotels and going from job to job. But we've got plenty of jobs for them, and even the Merchant Guild will have work for them, providing extra guards for the convoys full of Magitech. When they arrive here with low-value goods, they will only have a few guards, and they will need more for monster-infested areas or high-value cargo. Baron Keith smiled. I will tell my people the good news tomorrow. I also have some connections from my days in the Signia army, and I can get at least a few of my old comrades to post notices on our behalf. It doesn't cost them anything to inform the guild that we're looking for adventurers. The retired general held up a communication token, the simple Magitech devices that were used to relay information between nobles and higher-ranking officers. Similar to the gems that the Royal Guard used, but the spell would transmit a voice message. Less secure, as anyone nearby when the receiver activated his side would be able to hear the message. But much more effective for passing detailed messages. What are your plans for the next few days? Will you be out looking for more threats? Baron William asked. Alexis nodded. It is good training for myself and the guards. We will get soft and lazy if we're not fighting real targets. Dominic shrugged. I have a few projects to complete, including those extra spears. But I will join some of the outings as well. My primary magic is finally getting to the proficient level, but that also means that it will take much more work to keep it advancing. So, I will be spending time on that as well as designing new Magitech items for the factory. We have the initial designs fully simplified to make manufacturing as cheap and efficient as possible. But once those are widely embraced, we will need to expand to more domestic goods, and I want to maintain our place in the market. What level is your combat magic at now? Baron Keith asked. Level 12. I would like to get it to level 15 soon. 20 would be much better, but for now, 15 is the goal. That's where the next big milestone will be. Dominic explained. The Baron nodded. 20 is everyone's goal, so they can be recognized as a true expert. But at level 15, there aren't many who'll be able to overpower you anymore. It's a good standard for a core magical attack. Dominic wasn't going to tell them that all his spells were at the same level because he was only leveling the sorcerer's spellbook. The result was the same either way. He would be at level 15, and it was improving the magic in his body as well. Like what the second prince could do, Dominic's basic magical aptitude was increasing. When he made a new Magitech orb, he would have to see what level he could forcibly advance it to without using resources. That would give him a much better idea of where he was. If he could get them to level 2 or 3 without using any sort of resource, he would be happy. That was enough that he could claim to be a proficient mage, despite having no formal training. It would also let him fake being a low-level mage if he had to infiltrate somewhere again. Making a Magitech orb to put on display and forcing it to level 2 or 3 would give the impression that it was the best spell he had, which was exactly what he had done when the only spell he had was Minor Illusion. It was level 1, but he still wore it visible so that others would know that he had some magic. Appearances were everything when making a first impression. Chapter 299. How to Grow. A few hours after dark, everyone was ready to head to bed, and Alexis dragged Dominic away. Do you think that you could advance faster if we brought in a proper archmage? You learned so much just from one trip with my brother. Perhaps if we had a proper instructor here in town, you could advance your magical skills to the point that everyone would have to call you Master Mage. She suggested. Dominic shrugged. Everyone in Signia has to call me Royal Sorcerer or Duke anyhow, but being able to back up the titles would be good. I've got a decent array of magic already, but I don't know any of the fancy stuff that the trained mages learn. He could read the magical languages, but he had never trained in how to create magical circles, grand arrays, or other similar defensive magics that a real master mage would know. Alexis smiled. I will inform the king in the morning. He's going to be sending us people soon, so I might as well call in a favor and get an extra mage here for training. He will surely send one, even if it's just so that you're being trained by one of his people, not someone that the Merchants Guild found for us from outside the country. There are still some in the 3 Stantia province cities, but the king would never trust them to teach one of his dukes. They're not likely to be extremely loyal to Dagos, but they did work for them for the last decade. That alone is enough to question their suitability for the role. Besides, they might not have used the skills that we will need for at least 10 years, as Dagos was so set on eliminating magic from daily life. Dominic swatted her on the backside, chasing her into bed. You have a point. Though they're all Wavemates trained mages, everyone who didn't flee is viewed with suspicion by those who did, and those who never stopped fighting. It's a hard place for everyone to be in. You can't really blame them for not wanting to lose everything, and most of the Wavemates' mage towers were pacifists. That's a large part of why the nation fell so fast. They simply didn't fight back and thought that diplomacy could do something. But on the other hand, those pacifist mages spent all their time focusing on practical magic. That is the sort of magic that we need. The Purity sect learned a lot of combat magic as well as their utility magic. It's just unfortunate that we didn't manage to get a fully trained member and only found the acolytes. Alexis giggled. Is it true that their curse really will stop them from getting intimate? Dominic wrapped his arms around her. Even this level of cuddling would put the other person in crippling agony. It's both their strongest defense and their greatest weakness. They join the sect when they're little, and by the time that they're adults, they're so starved for affection that they naively believe anyone who is nice to them. It would be rude to call them morons, but they're clearly easy to exploit if you know their weak spots. Alexis frowned. Should we find a leader for their mage tower? Someone from the Purity sect, or another mage tower's elder? Dominic shrugged. It would have to be someone who knows the Purity sect's methods. They can't start a new path without destroying their existing progress, and they are cursed, so traditional growth through suffering styles of learning can't be used on them. Alexis smirked as Dominic's hands roamed. You know, we need to talk about your draconic heritage at some point, right? You can't always distract me from it with flirting. But I can try. Alexis pulled him into a kiss, then backed away. Try but not succeed. Now out with it. Dominic sighed in frustration. She knew his weak points as well. The stronger my innate magic gets, the more powerful the draconic blood in my body becomes. In theory, I just need to find a balance, and the outbursts of fangs and claws will stop. But in practice, it's not easy because every time it happens, the human side and the dragon side are in agreement. He offered. So, because you were born with a temper and an overbearing sense of hatred for injustice, it's too easy for your draconic side to take over? Alexis clarified. Not exactly take over. I don't even notice the change. I'm still me, and I'm not in some blind rage or a feral state. It's just that having fangs and claws when you want to tear someone apart is far too logical. Alexis hummed curiously as she ran her fingers over his chest. And when it happens outside of combat? Dominic licked up the rim of her ear, then kissed down her neck. I see, she stammered. Dominic chuckled as he continued with his kisses. Now she understood. The human and the dragon were in perfect agreement about what needed to be done, and both sets of instincts were working in harmony toward the same well-planned goal. Even if he did need to trim his hair so that she couldn't get such a good grip on it. Not that it would help. If she was unable to get a grip on his hair, she would find another way to express her approval of his technique. Dominic sighed as the morning light from the window hit him in the face. That settled it. He had a new plan for the day. He was making a Magitech device with a timer to shut those damned curtains at midnight and not open them until after he got out of bed in the morning. This happened far too often, and Alexis liked looking out at the stars before bed, so they couldn't just have the maids close the curtains when they prepared the room. The only solution was putting them on a timer. This routine was getting old. Chapter 300. Fix the curtains. Once they were showered, Dominic kept to his determination and went to the library to look for an existing design that would pull the curtains shut on a timer. There was an index to the library somewhere, Dominic was certain. Or there had been when he was young. Now, he couldn't find it, and there was no guarantee that it wasn't part of the collection of tomes that were burnt during the raid. So, he spent most of the morning searching through the library for the books that he needed, while constantly infusing the sorcerer's spellbook with energy, increasing both the stored power and his affinity for the item. It was perfect multitasking efficiency. Or, it would be if he could ever find the book that he was looking for. There were only two essential tasks for him right now, as the duchy was finally starting to maintain itself. That was to prepare for the factory opening, and to improve his own skills so that he could properly defend against outside threats. Finally, Dominic found something that could be counted as useful. It wasn't a design to close the curtains, it was an automatic door opener. However, he could activate it from the bed, and it would close the curtains for him. It was perfect. Even better, it was only one Magitech circuit on a lever and a bracket. But for the curtain, Dominic thought that a pulley and belt would be better. That way, he could just run it long enough to get the curtain into the spot he wanted. Dominic spent the rest of the day drawing up the design for the device with a single gear, a pulley, and a belt that could be latched to the two sides of the curtains, so it would pull them together when activated. The majority of the parts, he ended up making with clay to copper. That just left the belt and a dilemma. Should it be leather? Did the material matter? The curtains were on a rod and slid easily, so Dominic didn't think that it did, and he had plenty of spare cloth, so that made the first belt. He went up just before dinner and mounted the mechanism to the wall with improvised stone anchors. Then, he attached the curtains to the cloth belt and smiled as the device smoothly pulled the curtains open and shut. Now, he could rest assured that when he inevitably forgot to close them later, he wouldn't have to deal with light in his face at sunrise. With that major problem solved, he could rest easily. In the most literal sense, Dominic managed to get 5 whole mornings of peace, earned by closing the curtains the moment that he began to wake up, before one dreary morning brought a merchant caravan riding through the drizzling rain to their duchy, and many more hopeful new residents. Many more. Dominic saw the size of the convoy coming from the castle city side of the route, and went out to meet with them. Your Grace. It's an honor to be greeted by you personally. I have brought many of the supplies that the duchy had on its list. I also received your personnel request, and these debtors have been vetted by the guild. Now, there are an awful lot of them, but the Merchants Guild is willing to work with you on a payment plan. The guild representative announced. These are all people under a debt contract? Did the guild suddenly become loan sharks? Dominic retorted. It's not that. Well, perhaps it is, but we're not trying to be loan sharks. We're not even charging interest or fees on the loans. It's just that the allotment for refugee foodstuffs in Castle City only covers so much, and everyone is buying from us to supplement their diet. We did choose the ones coming with us to be suitable for Wistover, though. All of them have an affinity for magic, tested and verified. All of the families have at least one trade skill, and every one of them volunteered to start over here after being told you were the Duke of Wistover, but not that you were married to Princess Alexis. Some already knew. There's no stopping the gossip. But we didn't make a point of it. He explained. If that's the case, then we're happy to have them. We've got some new housing ready for them, and a few full houses left for the larger families. If they're farmers, we got plenty of good farmland left. Dominic explained. I see that they've been doing some renovations here since the last caravan. Those apartment blocks look new. The merchant agreed. Indeed. And that long building on the edge of town is the new Magitech factory. By the end of the month, we will be turning out mass-produced lights and fireplace inserts. The Merchants Guild expressed some interest in working out a long-term purchase deal for them, but that can wait until we have actual samples finished. That sounds reasonable. Do you have a proof of concept so that I can relay the message to the others? Dominic nodded. They're at the Techno Wizard's place, or in the new apartments. If you want to head over, you can see what they look like in use. The apartments are mostly empty, so we won't be bothering anyone if we head into a vacant unit. That would be perfect. I wonder what sort of product you think can be mass-produced. Dominic chuckled. You would be surprised what we can manage. Was there the teacher that we requested in this batch? The merchant nodded. Yes, but it takes years to train a techno-wizard. Dominic patted him on the shoulder. Fortunately, that's not what I have planned. I just need to train apprentices to make one single item for their job. And it's a simple item, the sort that I learned in the first few units when I started training. Now, I will let Julio deal with the small details, and we can inspect the products. Julio sighed in resignation. He already knew that was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to sort out this mass of new arrivals.